This is your Chargers linebacker, Daiyan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, as we have relished in Victory Monday earlier this week. Week 1 in the books. Chargers defeated the Raiders 22-10. We now turn our attention to Week 2 as the Chargers travel on the road to the Carolina Panthers for a interesting road trip that's coming up here against Carolina, and then following up Week 3 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Dan, this is, for all the things that we know were different, with a different vibe, with a different feeling, especially defensively, and the offense coming on in the second half the way it did against the Las Vegas Raiders, it wasn't without its flaws. And there were some things that you would like to see be corrected as this next week comes on and the weeks after that are going to follow. But Dan and I are going to break down all the key matchups as it relates to the Los Angeles Chargers going up against the Carolina Panthers, offensively, defensively, coaching strategies, biggest key storylines that we want to focus in on. Before we do that, Dan Wolkenstein, how are you, sir?
I am good. Happy victory, whatever day it is this week. We're celebrating every day with the victory. Have your brisket, have your cocktail, have your bourbon, have your nice espresso in the morning. Feeling good. And yeah, Chargers, big win against the Raiders, set themselves up nicely for the soft landing against the Carolina Panthers, who are going through it and are probably wishing that Week 1 was this week and not last week. And last week was preseason, as they got the brakes blown off of them by the Saints. And Chargers are looking to kind of establish some momentum, and big shoes to fill after that physical, dominating performance they had. And coming up is a Panthers team on the road that has some fun matchups. I think you have to believe the Chargers are probably licking their chops a bit right now, especially, heck, on both sides of the ball, for that matter. Let's call a spade. The Panthers aren't very good right now, and we'll be interested to see what happens with the new Jim Harbaugh era in terms of playing up or down to competition. You'd like to think that that's a thing of the past. The Chargers play their game. They come out of this game winning. Simple as that, but we'll see. Jake, how are you?
You said it, Dan. Coming off of the high of the Week 1 victory, and it's more so just, I think it's the way in which the Chargers won, and it's the identity that they put forward. I think that may even be more of the high than just the Chargers getting a Week 1 victory.
100%.
It's the things that you hear afterwards, like the comments from Joey Bosa to say, I've been 1-0 plenty of times to start a season. Getting to 2-0 is better. And the consistent message that this coaching staff has talked about, stacking bricks. Now let's stack some wins.
In winning Week 2, you can't go 2-0 without going 1-0. As Jim Harbaugh said, I believe. And you heard Jim Harbaugh talk post-game about the opportunity to improve this team being very large, going from Week 1 to Week 2 specifically, because now they got stuff on tape to go through and review. And, the offense looked a little rusty at times at the first half of that Raiders game. You would think it's not going to look like that moving forward. And again, like going back to this, like the Panthers team is not great. Like it really isn't. We just heard news. Derek Brown, one of their star players on defense, out for the season. And so a Christian Wilkins type of impact, no more on that defense. It's going to be a struggle for the Panthers. I think they would say that any given Sunday, as we all know. But look, the Panthers aren't that great. And if you look at some of the statistics that they have for this past game, one game in, dead last in points allowed on defense, the 28th on offense for points scored. You go and look at rushing attempts on defense allowed, 27th, 29th in yards, 32nd ranked offense in terms of yards, 28th in terms of passing attempts, yards per attempt, dead last on offense, 31st in scoring percentages. I mean, it's not great. So it's going to be a tall task. And you flip the other side, just kind of looking at like the high level, right? Like looking at the Chargers league ranked offense, points 22, ranked 16th, right in the middle. Second best defense in terms of points allowed. Otherwise, I mean, we saw it last week. For the most part, the Chargers defense was pretty dominant on both sides. They gave up some in the passing game, kind of had somewhat of a bend but don't break, but they were about as dominant as you can ask for week one against a Raiders offense. Granted, with Gardner Minshew, but they have playmakers. They have playmakers like Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers. These guys are good. And for the most part, even some of the plays they did get, some of those catches by the tight ends, they were like prayers. The Chargers were all over them. So make no mistake about it. Chargers are favored. I think last I saw was a 6-point favorite. Jake, before we get to offense versus defense on both sides, let's quickly pay the bills. Let's talk about friends.
Want to remind everybody that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet for up to $250 on your first deposit on everything from the UFC to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag to get in on the action. Just make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. BetOnline. The game starts here.
So, kicking things off, let's talk injuries first. We saw our first injury report come out this week. Jake, I think for the Chargers, the main ones to look at are Ja'Sir Taylor, the safety, and Alohi Gilman. So safeties might be a little thin depending on how things go. Otherwise, the team looks pretty healthy.
Yeah, and it's nice to see in place for Ja'Sir Taylor for a player who wasn't pretty much limited last week, didn't end up playing in the game against the Raiders, that Tarheeb Still was a full participant in practice. Keep an eye on the Alohi Gilman injury, obviously. It be interesting to see if Tony Jefferson ends up getting elevated for the practice squad, if this injury continues throughout the week. How are they going to rotate your safeties in that certain aspect? But the good thing is Coach Clinkscale has talked about all offseason. This is how versatile you make this secondary group. So I'm sure that Jesse Minter has contingency plans in place on the off chance if injuries were to linger to the Sunday morning game.
And on the Panthers side, Jake, I believe you have the latest injury report on their side. How's it looking?
Yeah, so Jadeveon Clowney did not practice today due to an ankle, but it doesn't look like it's that serious. Apparently, he was on the bike at practice today, and Dave Canales had said that it was just a rest day, more of a rest day for him, just to take a day to get right. So early indications look like that Jadeveon Clowney will end up playing on Sunday. Their punter, Johnny Hecker, apparently suffered a back injury at some point during the Saints game. They were unable to determine exactly when that took place. As of right now, they said that they don't have any contingency plans to bring in another punter, but they have a short list of names if Johnny Hecker is not able to go. Outside of that, it looks like the rest of their players were limited. We'll obviously keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the week to see if anything changes.
So, which way you want to start, Jake? We got the key storylines, which we'll do after we go through the offensive defensive side, but Chargers offense versus Carolina defense, or Chargers defense versus Carolina offense?
I think you kind of got to go down with the offensive side of the football this time. This is where the most questions took place as far as what you would hope to see change move forward with this team. And the great thing about this is that when you heard Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert at the podium today, there was a lot of indicative comments that they made to suggest, obviously, that they weren't 100% happy with what took place in the Raiders game offensively. They know that there were struggles. Justin Herbert alluded to the penalties that took place on offense that were drive killers throughout that first half. I think one of the best quotes that I liked about Justin Herbert, Dan, is that he said, we're not going to come out and have the same type of offensive attack every single week. It's going to be different sometimes. Much like I said, Dan, after the Raiders game, that we're not used to this type of thing for this Chargers franchise. To hear aspects of this not only from Justin Herbert, but what we've essentially heard from the coaching staff as well. Game preparation. Week to week. Different styles. Finding different ways to win. Against the Raiders, you didn't have to rely on Justin Herbert's arm. The running game took over in that second half.
If we're talking simply just look at the scoreboard, Panthers got blitzed last week, 30-0 before they can even score a point. It was 30-0 at halftime, I believe. And for Derek Carr, I mean, we know very well about Derek Carr. I mean, he was incredibly efficient. I think he was like 19 for 23 for 200 yards. And you saw Alvin Kamara doing Alvin Kamara things. He had over 100 yards from scrimmage. I mean, the Carolina defense didn't really put much of a fight up. I mean, they gave up 47 points. And so this is a get-right opportunity for the Chargers. Again, the Panthers' strength, air-wise, was the interior defensive line that they no longer have. So this should be kind of a better outing, if you will, just to put it kindly, for the Chargers offense. And I think that they kind of, could use it. Look, if you look at the other opposing defense, for the Panthers, Jordan Fuller, I think, got torched. Their pass coverage wasn't great. It's to be had. And I think the Chargers offense has an opportunity. I think there's a couple of things we saw. Justin Herbert will not look like what he looked like week one. I can promise you that. I think the receivers also are going to have a little bit of a get-right game this week. But make no mistake about it. They should, and I hope they do, pound it.
First of all, I would assume, Dan, you and I both have J.K. Dobbins on our fantasy team.
Yes. Are we starting him this week?
We are starting him this week. We are not falling into that same trap when we had him on our bench during week one. We are not falling into that.
Okay, question, sidebar. Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins. Start two.
Start two of them?
That's my three.
I didn't even look at the matchups for Baltimore and New York.
Baltimore's playing the Raiders.
Okay.
And I forget who the Jets are playing.
I would probably go with Derrick Henry then in that circumstance.
So Derrick Henry and JK?
Yep.
And bench Breece Hall.
Unless you tell me that the Breece Hall has a better matchup, sure.
Okay. Continue. Apologies.
Anyways. To your point, Dan, yes, I think the Chargers offense is going to look a little bit different, even though I think that they're going to be able to establish the run much earlier than they did against that Raiders team last week. I'll be interested to see what the Carolina Panthers do defensively, especially with Derrick Brown being out of there. That's going to take a lot away from the interior pressure. I think about, okay, if Jadeveon Clowney ends up playing, we saw the performance that Joe Alt put up last week against Max Crosby. If you're not getting pressure there, I doubt you're going to shift him over to Rashawn Slater's side. Are they going to take a page out of the Raiders book when the Las Vegas Raiders were having Max Crosby come in on stunts and try to get in on that interior pressure, the weak spot of the Chargers offensive line? I think that they probably will take a similar tactic to that in order just to confuse Justin Herbert at times, to attempt to do that. But that would also be a point of contention where you would hope that the Chargers' interior of the offensive line performs much better than it did last week. Your two tackles, they stacked up very well. Daiyan Johnson, Trey Pipkins, Bradley Bozeman, that was where a majority of the pressure was coming from throughout the entirety of that game. So need to tighten up the screws. This would be a game to get it right, to get better, hopefully bring some momentum when you're going to have to play the Steelers in 2 weeks, which is going to be a very, very different defense that you're going to have to go up against. But outside of that, Dan, I think that much like the Raiders game, if you're able to win in the trenches, you're going to be able to dictate this ball game. You're probably just going to be able to dictate it in much different ways than what we saw, than just the running game becoming dominant in the second half.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like the Chargers offense should feast. I think Herbert and the receivers are going to look good, but I think the Chargers running game is going to be dominant. I mean, the Panthers a week ago gave up 180 yards and 2 touchdowns on 37 carries. I mean, they were running constantly on them, and it continued throughout the game. Derek Carr had 4 incomplete passes the entire game. So both have an opportunity.
I'm curious because maybe you can call this as a bold prediction, if you will. You know, a lot of the times that we criticize previous regimes for the Chargers, when you'd watch teams defensively have their weakness, and then when the Chargers would come to play them, it was essentially that they would
whatever that is.
Yeah, the Chargers aren't going to attack it, and they're not going to take advantage of it.
Or the things that they suck at, they will all of a sudden explode against the Chargers.
I would assume, even though Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman are going to be run, dictate the pace, whatever it is, the Saints beating the Panthers by 37 points and watching Derek Carr sling the ball around and find openings in that secondary, do you think it's a better shot that they do that even with a younger receiver core like this, Dan? And even with a younger receiving core that necessarily hasn't played that much together, obviously in regular season time? Or do you think that they stick to their guns and they just say, hey, let's own it? If it's another Justin Herbert, 144-yard, 1 touchdown game,
it won't be that.
Who cares?
It will. Again, I don't think they went into the game expecting 144 yards from Justin Herbert. Like there some things to give the Raiders defense credit. I think they're going to look to this game, hope to be balanced, and not rely on Justin Herbert to provide any heroics, and hopefully start resting players in the fourth quarter. I think that's what the goal is. But Jim Harbaugh said it. Every NFL victory is hard. So you go into it respecting the opponent, respecting their abilities. But yeah, you should have your way. I mean, coverage, literally, they had one. I'm looking at PFF right now just to kind of make sure I was checked here. They had one coverage grade above 70. The rest of them are between 27 and 65. And these are big snaps. Jordan Fuller, 27 plays in coverage, 27.4. Shaq Thompson, 27 coverage snaps, 49 grade. Their other corner, J.C. Horn, remember that name? 58.3. Not great. Derek Carr, I think, was chirping at J.C. Horn last game about this. So, yeah, I think I said it before. Like both sides of the ball for the Chargers are licking their chops.
You know, the interesting thing was when you look at just the secondary unit, specifically of the Carolina Panthers, Dan, this is more for me, not necessarily a big picture aspect of these players' play. But there's so many familiar names in this secondary that we have talked about individually on this show over a number of years that brings back memories. J.C. Horn being one of them, Troy Hill being another, Tariq Castro Fields is part of that secondary as well.
Yep.
And I'm just looking at this like history of draft prospects that we talked about many, many moons ago. And just to see, they're now all collectively on this team.
Panthers has them all.
And unfortunately, the secondary is performing the way that they're playing. So here's my opinion, Dan, on the wide receiver group. At times, the Chargers wide receivers were hard pressed, obviously, to get separation. Mm-hmm. The pressure that was on Justin Herbert obviously didn't help that timing. No. But I would hope that this would be something where Sanjay Lal is pulling them aside to say, look, this is what we're going to do. I would hope that they're going to get Quentin Johnston in crossing routes and getting him in open space a lot more than what they did in that first game. Not to say that they're going to fully go away with it. I'm pretty sure that you're, especially with DJ Chark still out, that you're going to have some of those attempts for him deep downfield.
Sure.
But look what worked for him. I know when we were talking about to say, hey, look, Quentin Johnston was still the second leading wide receiver that you had on your team by 1 yard just behind Ladd McConkey last week. But it was the ways that they quickly adapted to say, okay, that's not working for Quinn. Let's try it in a different way. Let's take, a similar type of route that Quentin Johnston took in the TCU Michigan game
to the house.
What a concept. Jim Harbaugh is trying to get something back off of that game that was a detriment to him. So I'm looking forward to seeing this as a building game for not only Quentin Johnston, but obviously more rapport for Justin Herbert, Ladd McConkey, and the rest of this wide receiver unit. I don't think that this, I would love to see it. I don't think that they would activate Brenden Rice for this game. I actually hope that I'm wrong in saying that. I think that they may go with the same type of personnel that they had last week. But we'll see. I think that there is still some advantages that you can take. Protection-wise should be better. Running game should be able to dictate. And Justin Herbert should be able to find his openings much easier this week.
I agree. Let's move on to the opposite side of the ball. Carolina offense versus the Chargers defense. And Jesse Minter must be very excited about the opportunity to showcase his defense against this Panthers offense that not great. And you saw last year Carolina's offensive line. And I don't really know if it's offensive line as much as it is just a rookie quarterback who doesn't understand the clock that he has to process and get it out before he gets sacked. And Bryce Young takes a lot of sacks. And this past week, he had 4 sacks on him, 3 of which came from Alontae Taylor, by the way. So secondary, I wonder if there's a defensive coordinator who enjoys rushing and providing pressure from the secondary.
I can't think of one. Not at all.
You heard Jim Harbaugh talk this week about the impression the interior defensive line had on him this week and how well they played against the Raiders. And he mentioned they want to try to get Tyler Tart more snaps on the interior. But when you get that production from that rotation, it balls. And you saw what happened from the edge group. Obviously, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa were fantastic. Poona Ford on the inside, Morgan Fox. Don't look now, but Christian Fulton looked pretty good. Asante Samuel Jr. looked pretty good. Derwin's Derwin, back to his tackling self. A lot of, I think, names you have in Carolina from a receiver standpoint. You've got the new Xavier Legette that I was high on in the draft. Adam Thielen's there. They got Miles Sanders on the running back. It's all going to come down to getting to Bryce Young. If they can get to Bryce Young, stop the run, game over. I promise you they win this game. If they can't, if Bryce Young all of a sudden gets out, starts looking like Alabama Bryce Young, different story. Previous regimes, we might say, maybe we'll see it. Seeing how they were able to not only game plan for the Raiders offense, but also adjust mid-game to the Raiders offense, you got to think Jesse Minter has some fun stuff dialed up.
Previous regimes, it wouldn't matter if the running back was named Dylan McCluskey back there. That dude was probably running for 100 yards and a touchdown against previous regimes.
What was the Patriots running back that just torched the Chargers a couple years ago? He had a fun name.
Oh, it wasn't a running back. It was one of their special teams, Gunnar Olszewski. Yes.
Yes, there it is. There it is.
One of the very few bold predictions that I have been able to hit during the time of doing this podcast with Dan. I think Gunnar had like 2 touchdowns in that game, one of them being a return, the other one of them being a pass catching touchdown. That was in that 45-0 blowout that the Patriots gave the Chargers.
Let's not talk about that anymore. No more. Thank you. Let's be real. Like, what? I don't want to be too cocky or too bullish here, Jake, but like, what are your expectations for net results from the defense on Sunday? Like, are you expecting better or worse than what we saw last week?
I mean, Dan, it's
or the same.
You know, the interesting thing is that in Charger fans' heads, they're probably thinking to themselves, we've seen this movie before, where the Chargers are coming off of a nice win, and you go into against an opponent that, in terms of roster, record, history, you should be able to handle fairly easily. Mm-hmm. And then historically, we have seen them either play down to their opponent or, more surprisingly, end up losing those games. How good did it feel to hear Jim Harbaugh acknowledge that during the press conference today, when he basically anticipates, like, the Panthers are going to have a bad taste in their mouth after getting beaten by 37 points, and basically make so many comments to say, hey, we're not coming in here underestimating them. we still have to go out and handle business.
Yep.
Defensively, Dan, it's pretty hard to find a barometer after just yielding 10 points to
Those
a team.
playmakers.
I mean, as a result of a missed tackle, that's 7 points that's on the board. This is also against an offense that had Devontae Adams with it, who had historically torched you over the last 4 games. Dan, it was just a completely different defense.
Mm-hmm.
So barometer from week 1 to week 2, when we're talking about the difference of opponent, really it shouldn't need to be changed that much. There were not that many things that you'd say, hey, I would like this to get better or this to get better. You would hope that the point output stays relatively low.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come in here and say that the Chargers are going to pitch a shutout. But in terms of this team, to your point, Dan, I think it's a very simple formula. You take away the running game and the likes of Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, you take those weapons away from Bryce Young. Now to force him into passes against Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, whatever it is.
Like that.
The pass rush can win.
Let the pass rush eat. That's what you want.
If the interior of the defensive line that we saw against the Raiders in week 1 shows up for week 2, I don't see how there should be any issues in the Chargers doing that.
No, I agree.
So the formula should be very, very simple defensively about what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm with you. And seeing some of the highlights and some of the film the Chargers have put out this week of, the Chargers defensive coaching staff, being hyped for some of the interior defensive line stops that they had and how connected the entire team is. And, seeing Justin Herbert, this new 2.0 Terminator, Justin Herbert.
How good did that feel?
This is kind of a glow up moment and an opportunity for the Chargers to kind of put their stake in the ground of like, no, this is a different team. Chargers come out and blow this game out of the water. Like, they're going to look different. This is a trap game though. That week 3, week 4 matchups coming up against the Steelers and the Chiefs. They are staying out in Carolina, I believe, this week, which takes away 5,000 miles that they're supposedly going into the season going to be flying.
Harbaugh said, bring the board games.
Bring Monopoly and chess. Those are the things he's interested in. But that's kind of the storyline. The storyline is if the Chargers play the Chargers style of football up to their potential, this game shouldn't be close. You can't say that about the Panthers. And I have faith in Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter to continue what they did week 1. That was far more hostile than this game. Now, again, you don't want to let up. You don't want to get suckered into that trap game. But, we kind of talked about it a little bit, Jake, but when you think of the coaching staff and kind of the game plan, from the start, we talked about the staff being unapologetically themselves. And they'll tell you what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. The brand of football that they want. It's already started to express itself after 1 game. I don't see it expressing itself less in game 2. Is there anything else from a strategy or game plan that we haven't really already seen the blueprint for?
Stack. No. I don't think it's anything different, even though Justin Herbert kind of alluded to it to say, hey, look, we're not going to come out with the same game plan every week, which you love to hear. I still think it's all going to have the same foundation. You get the running game going, you're going to be able to allow Justin Herbert to do more. In this particular circumstance, in this matchup, Dan, I think the middle of the Carolina Panthers defense is ripe. Absolutely ripe. So where we weren't able to see a lot of targets go over the middle that were successfully completed.
Mm-hmm.
A la what I was alluding to with getting Quentin Johnston in space more. I think that this is going to allow players like Joshua Palmer and Ladd McConkey to feed. I think that you're going to see much more opportunities for the tight ends, whether it be Will Dissly or Hayden Hurst, to find success over the middle. I think that's an area that you can definitely exploit, and that should be able to continue drives, and you should be able to put points on the board because of it.
I'm with you. Bold predictions and prediction time, Jake. We have speaking of which, you have a giveaway opportunity, possibly. Speaking of bold prediction, Go to LAC_unleash on Twitter or X. The stakes are this week. If the Chargers get a defensive touchdown, the winner of the giveaway will get a defensive player's jersey of choice. All you got to do, follow us and retweet the post. That's it. And if they get it, bam, someone gets their jersey of choice. Khalil Mack, Christian Fulton, whoever. Last week's bold prediction, just to give a recap, Jake nailed his. J.K. Dobbins go over 100 yards. I was a shoestring tackle trip from Christian Fulton away from my defensive touchdown being scored. Bold prediction time, Jake. What's yours for week 2 versus Carolina?
Let's see if I can go 2 for 2 here. God, there's a part of me that tells me that you're going to want to make a defensive prediction on this one. So I'm going to keep it on the offensive side of the ball. I don't want to recycle the J.K. Dobbins pick. I actually think that you're going to get more success out of not only J.K. Dobbins, but Gus Edwards this week. So I think the two-headed monster is going to show up. However, if I was to go bold prediction here,
the suspense.
How about a Hayden Hurst revenge game? How about Hayden Hurst? 56 yards and a touchdown.
Okay. Bradley Bozeman again.
Bradley Bozeman also a revenge game as well. So I would hope that performance would be good. But everybody likes to see, points and stats and every other damn thing. So Hayden Hurst, 56 yards and a touchdown.
Okay. On offense, I'll give you Bradley Bozeman revenge game too. Like I think the offensive line, I'm gonna go no sacks on the offense for bold prediction on the Chargers, which I don't know if it's that bold with their offensive line with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Interior is the part that's the question, but bold prediction, 2-part. I'll say defense. 4 turnovers, one of which is a defensive score.
So somebody's getting a jersey, according to Dan Wolkenstein.
That's my goal. That's my hope. I'm a man of the people. I try.
You are.
I try. Final score predictions. Jake, I think both of us have the Chargers winning this one. What do you see it as?
I give it 28-10.
My first thought was 30-13, but I'm going to go 27-13. 27-13. I know, wow, they scored more than the Raiders, but every game's different. We have some fun planned, Jake, for folks who are not subscribed or have the notifications turned on. Might want to do that. Stay tuned for a little surprise we've got for you. But Jake, anything else before we head on out of here?
I hope everybody was just listening to Dan Wolkenstein. I mean, if there's ever a definition of a tease and him trying to allude to something, let me be of assistance. If you have heard me say the phrase, when Dan Wolkenstein works the phones, great things tend to happen, I would advise you to keep your eyes open. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Chargers have an opportunity to go 2-0, which they haven't done in a minute, going back against the Carolina Panthers, who they are favored for. I think right now, again, I think it's 6 points, but we will be here. You'll be hearing from us more this week as we prep for the Panthers game on Sunday. But until then, for Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake T. Hefner. Myself, you can find at Dan W Sports. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, hit that like and subscribe. Help us out wherever you can. Give us a review. Give us some feedback, criticism, whatever it is. We're here for you all. Thank you all so much. And we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Up.